What's up, team? My name is Richard Hemphill Jr. Welcome to my channel. Listen, today we talk to Coach Dan Lundy with Fourth Down University. We talk about faith, giants, and how the sports world has changed for youth and students. Tune in, transform the game. Let's go. How are you doing, Coach?
I'm doing well,
Man, I'm so honored, man, to have you on this podcast. As we were discussing earlier, this is our very first time meeting each other and engaging in some type of conversation. There's two reasons why I'm really excited. I heard that you taught at my former high school, Mainland High School. That's right. So I think when I heard you say "Buck pride never dies," I said, you know what? He's no longer a guest. He's family. You know, anyone who says "Buck pride never dies," they have a special place in my heart, man. So, and I saw that you are a family guy. I've been watching I was gonna say ministry, but I've been watching what you're doing with Fourth Down University for a while. Even before I started following you on Instagram, I was paying attention. I said, that's pretty cool. That's unique. So, like I said, I'm very excited about this conversation. I'm excited about what you are going to deposit into me, into future listeners, and see how our two audiences merge in the future. So tell our listeners about Fourth Down University, about your organization, about your focus, anything that you want to share.
Try and keep it brief. I was a kicker. You know, I kicked at Mainland High School. I'm a 2000 grad, and I played at Miami, played for the Hurricanes. I was actually a part of the last national championship team. And on that team, you know, and we're going to talk about this later in the show, but I was in a culture of winning. And I learned like what it meant to be a champion. And it wasn't just, oh, I've got a ring on my finger and we're on ESPN and I'm really good at what I do on the football field. It's like, it was all the intangibles, you know, it was all the other things that no one cares or thinks about, because until you're in that process of what a championship means and a championship run, I don't think you really realize all of the little details that it takes, you know, all of the extra when no one's asking you or expecting it out of you. You do it because it's within you. And right. I think that comes because you draw those things from others who are like-minded, and it's very rare. That's why there's very few champions, right? So that being said, I had a calling, if you will. You know, it was more of a push from one of my older teammates who had started a kicking company in Miami. He had graduated from Miami, and he kept bugging me. And finally, I did it. I coached. You know, I didn't think I wanted to coach ever. I wanted to play. I wanted to be a pro, and I wanted to retire, and I wanted to have kids. And that wasn't the end game for me. I had an injury, and I realized really quickly at 21 that God had another plan, if you will. And I felt like this was like a push in more than one way from God, from Freddie Capshaw, my teammate, to give coaching a go. I stayed down there in Miami for a few years, and when I started teaching, like you mentioned, at Mainland in 2006, I started my own company. You know, I was in Daytona, and I was like, I'm going to start it small. I'm going to do it my way. I learned how my buddy did it. I've studied my industry. The kicking industry is actually a pretty big one. There's 18,000 kids that kick in high school. There's 18,000 kids that punt in high school, and there's 18,000 kids that snap. That's 54,000 kids that I could potentially coach. Right. It's a big industry for it, just like basketball. So long story short, Fourth Down U is focused on kicking, punting, and snapping. It's growing. I go all over the place. I speak at Nike and Glazer clinics, and my purpose right now is to educate these coaches as to how important it is to have a proficient kicker, punter, and snapper.
So tell me this, because you came from a culture of champions, Miami, I said, wow, I did not know that about you going to the U. How, in your opinion, how has things changed in terms of players, in terms of culture, and in terms of football?
I'll start with drastically, and for the better in the most part. I know the specialization now. A kid at 6 and 7 has options to go get trained as a quarterback, a DB, a kicker. That did not exist when I was growing up. And I'm not that old. You know, I was a teenager in the 90s. you went to a football summer camp and maybe got 2 or 3 days of instruction a year. And other than that, you didn't have YouTube. All you had was television. And if you aspired to be like someone or play like someone, you were going to tune in and watch them. And you had to write down when they were going to play because you couldn't DVR it. So, yeah, it's changed drastically and for the better for the most part because of the specialization. But I will say off the field, I think it's equally on the opposite side. I think that there's so many distractions. There's a me culture that's permeating all the way down to middle school and elementary school now, where a kid thinks that he needs to establish a brand. Yeah. And with that, I think there's positives in that. But like everything, you have to look at both sides of things. When a kid thinks he's his own brand at 7, the lack of respect that shows even at the youth levels to coaches and other teammates, it's showing.
Yeah.
And it's hurting the team culture that we're going to talk about. So I think that we have more talent across the board at all sports, all positions because of the specialization. However, I think that we need to remind ourselves that champions are always willing to learn and get better.
Yeah. And I think about that too. I mean, I follow some kids, they may be 10 or 11 years old on Instagram and they have millions of followers and they've established a brand, and they, they're still being tucked in at night and being read a bedtime story, but they have these huge brands, and that, they're managed by their mothers or by their fathers, but things have drastically changed, not just for you, but for sports in general. So one thing that I believe we will run into with my area of focus is dealing with the culture, dealing with families and things like that. Tell me, you mentioned about the U, but can you go a little bit more into what it meant to be a part of that type of winning culture? Is there levels to winning cultures and things like that?
Now, I'm going to start with a negative because, I don't want to paint a completely rosy picture. I think that we all have our flaws. I know. We're all imperfect. All organizations are imperfect. So with Miami, I think that the one negative I'll say is that there was an overemphasis on winning to where things that I valued as a student were compromised. Okay. And one example I'll give is we had a 4-star receiver. He came in with me, Jason Gathers, great guy. Came in late to a special teams meeting before a practice in the middle of the season, probably 5 minutes late. Coach turns the light on, stops the film, just screams at him incessantly. Yeah. And then Jason gives him a note and says, "This is from my professor. I was in a midterm. I'm so sorry. I just needed a little extra time." And he said, "If you wanted to go to school, you should have gone to Harvard." Wow. So we weren't perfect by any means. Right. And we knew what the priority was football. Okay. And I think we've gotten better as a culture with that, but that was the mantra then. And that was unfortunate because I think we could have eased up and realized that there were other important things too, because a few of us got hurt, and ironically, he and I both got hurt. Yeah. So had we not had an education, right? Had we not, ignored that point that I didn't agree with, we would have probably been other places. But on the bright side, yeah, I think when you're around like-minded people who have common goals, who it's almost like a church congregation. People put you in check. Everyone slips, and if you see someone slip and a brother or sister slip, your job is to go over there and address that issue, not to judge, but to remind them of what their purpose is. Right. And I think it's no different with teams.
Let's talk a little bit more about Fourth Down University. So I have a son, and he's a kicker, or he's a specialist, and I introduce him to you. How do you create a culture that kids want to be a part of? Because culture it means a lot to kids. So how do you create a culture that kids want to be a part of, and at the same time a culture that parents trust you to get my son to this next level or to instill good values in him? How do you do that?
Well, unfortunately and fortunately, I like that question. The fortunate thing for me is you have to have a history of success. If you want to enter the market in anything, you have to have a resume per se. And if you haven't produced it's going to be very hard to build a clientele. It's going to be a slow process. And it was for me. I mean, I'm in my 19th year coaching and doing this. My first 10, you know, I'd have one or two kids, maybe 5 one day, and be like, whoa, I got 5 kids. And then all of a sudden it's one of those 5 kids is playing on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and then he tells the world, by the way, I would not be here without Dan Lundy, thankfully. You know, like you get a couple of those moments, and it's not that you can't chase those moments. Those moments are going to come or they're not, but thankfully they did. So it starts with reputation and having a history of like helping kids get to where they want to go. And fortunately, I have that. And I think from there, it's just being consistent in your process and relentless in finding a way to get better with it. I am very consistent. However, I do make changes if I think they're for the better of the whole. And lastly, it's personalization. I can't just have a process. I can't just make the program better. I mean, that's very generic, right? I have to say, well, there's Richard looking me in the face right now. The notes I have off Richard last week are here, here, and here. What has he done to change it? If he hasn't, we need to address that. You know, that's simple. But if he has, what's the disconnect if it hasn't been fixed? And I love that. And I think that's where I stand out in my industry is I want to make you a personal problem. Yeah. And I want to fix it.
Yeah. And I see that. I was on your Facebook page last night, honestly, just kind of going, I said, wow, you really pay attention. I think you had a virtual session. I said, now that's new, but I mean, this is the times that we live in, you know, so I believe that personalization means a lot. I was talking to my trainer last week, and I mean, I can go to the gym and work out myself, but it is another thing to have someone say, you know what, Richard, last week you was here, you know, this week, how do you feel about going here and the extra push? So for me, it benefits me to have that personalization, even added to my fitness, knowing that he cares about my mobility, you know, my strength, you know, those different types of things. So honestly, man, that's great. That's great. I want to take a break. This is new to the podcast. This season, I want to take a 60-second time out where we get to know you a little bit more on a more personal level outside of Fourth Down University and anything that, you know, you do professionally. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds to answer these questions. All right. So this is our 60-second time out. Here we go. Favorite football player?
Goodness, Ricardo Allen. I don't know how I had to think about that. No doubt, Ricardo Allen. Yeah. For more reasons than one. I mean, the person he is, but player second.
Okay. Who's the better cook, you or your wife?
My wife by a long shot. However, the one thing I have a strength in is the grill, coach. Okay. All right.
All right. You have 2 daughters, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what are their favorite TV shows?
Goodness. Coco Melon is the little one, and they both share a passion for Llama Llama. That's the one thing they can definitely agree on at all times. My oldest is a show tunes girl, so she just likes to sing any song being sung in a Disney song, you know?
Okay. As a player, would you rather play home or away?
Away. I absolutely loved pregame when people would look me up in the media guide and start talking about my mom or Daytona. You know, I knew they didn't know who I was, but they would just talk smack, and I loved it. And it kind of got me ready to go, you know?
Right. Last question. Are you a morning person or night owl?
Well, it's weird. I get up early and I don't sleep well, but I would say if I had to pick one, most definitely I feel great in the morning.
Let's talk about your personal life a little bit and transition to maybe some situation, maybe some circumstance, maybe some storm that you've encountered that made Dan Lundy or is making Dan Lundy the man that you are today. Can you share with us any time that you face something that was bigger than yourself? I look at it like this. This is a time where you faced your own Goliath in your life. Is there anything that you can share with us that humanizes Dan Lundy in a sense?
Absolutely. My whole life, I grew up like you did in a culture where we were taught to brush it off and not to acknowledge weakness, not to appreciate weakness, I should say, embrace it, if you will. So I was not diagnosed until I was 25 with a mental health disorder. I never disclosed this with anybody other than my family and some friends. But yeah, in my mid 20s, I finally sought some medical attention and I was diagnosed. And I won't really disclose what exactly, but it's not the important thing. The important thing is I was vulnerable. I allowed myself to finally open up because I fought it forever. And I just felt like it was my fault. You know, there's almost these things of guilt by the culture I was around. That was another thing I'll say. It wasn't just Miami, it was at Mainland. It was just our culture in general back then. We didn't embrace the fact that we're probably not perfect mentally either. You know, we're gonna have anxiety, we're gonna have depression. It's okay if you are in fact bipolar. You know, there's chemical levels that could be off for whatever reason. We can't explain these things, and I don't think neurologists will ever be able to pinpoint everything that God created. You know, especially the brain. It's perplexing. So for us to at least try to attempt to help people like myself, I really appreciate these doctors, and I really appreciate those out there now that have allowed me to feel more comfortable about being okay with having a problem like a mental illness or a disorder, whatever you want to call it. I think those are stigmatic words. I'm different, and it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, and to me, the biggest giants are the ones that people really don't see. You know, it's the ones that you battle in your mind. It's the ones that you battle in your emotions, and you know, some things are more visible. But to me, it is the thoughts and things I go through at night when the house is quiet. You know, the thoughts that I have when I'm scrolling through Instagram or Facebook, or you know, just in the quietness. I think if we're honest about those giants, and like you said, you don't have to talk to everybody about it and make a post about it, but it's good that you have a community, that you have a family, you know, who knows some of the things that you're going through, you know, as a man, not even as a coach, not as the founder or CEO of Fourth Down University, but you know, you have giants as well. So I think that's awesome. I think it humanizes you, and I think it's needed for people just to know, you know, he's going through something as well. So most definitely. Can you tell me this? Can you tell me the importance of that type of relationship between you and a player? Has there ever been a time where either coach Bud Asher or someone else had to instill confidence in you? And second, have you ever had to instill confidence in a kid who did not believe that they could do anything pertaining to sports or life?
One of my darkest moments, at least at that point in my life, was when I realized that after my third adductor injury on my kicking leg, that it was time to hang up football as a player. And that was tough. I was young. I was in the prime of my life. It just kept going on me. And there was nothing that anyone could do as far as surgery or that could help other than just to, hey, accept it, right? I didn't want to accept that, and I was jaded. I didn't want to be around football, period. Then that was the attitude. And I kept getting asked, you know, by people in Miami, can you come to this camp and help coach this and come to this camp? And I was like, no. And I wasn't mean about it. I just avoided it, right? Because it made me sick to think about I was never gonna get to play, you know? But finally, my old teammate, Freddie Capshaw, who was a coach at the time after playing with me, he's like, dude, you got a gift. He's like, you used to help me. And you were younger. You used to just have an eye for it. You'd see something I was doing wrong. He's like, just give it a shot. And thankfully, I went out on a Sunday after church. The boys, I think they met around 1:00 at this park in Miami, and fell in love with it, dude. Like, I had this kid I'd never met. I probably hadn't seen since, but it was just that feeling when you're like, it clicked for somebody else, and I wanted to chase that again. So I haven't stopped. Now, as far as me, it's weird. Like an example of me as a coach giving it to a kid, I don't know if I could really think of just one that really stands out, I should say, because like I said, they all have their problem. But I will say, back to the David story, you know, a lot of people don't realize how skilled these shepherds were with these stones,
right?
And how far away they could hit like an animal. Right, because that's what they did, right? They had to go hit like a cow-sized predator away from a couple hundred meters, and they had a couple stones, and they'd hit it usually. after one or two tries. That's highly skilled. So that fascinated me about the David and Goliath story. But people have to realize David was very skilled with that weapon. He was given a tool though. And I guess the analogy I want to draw is that the stones that I'm given or I continue to put in my pocket are through hard work in finding problems and fixing problems. And I think my job will never be finished, because I might meet your son one day and he might be a freak, naturally gifted punter that does something for the first time that I see that's an outlier, that's not needed. And that gets me better. So I guess in short, to finish that is, I like to empower my athletes and I use my coaching as my stones.
Yeah. That is awesome. Is there anything else you want to share about Fourth Down University before we wrap up, as far as any words of advice to anyone who wants to pursue being a specialist?
Well, next week, and I don't know when you're going to release this, but March 20th, we're going to do a free middle school event for kickers, punters, snappers. So it's like ages 11 to 14, boys and girls welcome, because there was a girl that first girl just received a scholarship to kick in college. This just happened like less than a year ago. So yeah, it's going to be at the Ormond Beach Sports Complex. And other than that, they can find anything like that on fourthdownu.com. My Twitter is at fourthdownu. That's 4THDOWNU. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. But yeah, I just really want to thank you for your time. I'm glad that somehow, some way we got connected, man.
Yeah, I was so excited when you responded back. I ran in and told the wife, because it's hard sometimes to connect with people in social media. It's social media, but sometimes the connections are very hard to make unless you know someone who can make that connection for you. So I'm very grateful for this and to learn a little bit more about you, man, to know that you're a fighter. To see the David in you as well, man. Those stones, that's a message, brother. Now I'm thinking about what stones I have in my pocket or what stones I need in my pocket as well. So awesome. One thing I want to do before, this year, I want to launch a campaign where I can get 100 people to say transform the game, and how your specific industry, how your specific organization is making a difference. It's helping the community, it's helping kids. So if you can tell my audience how Fourth Down University, how even you as a father or as a husband, how are you transforming the game? How are you making that difference?
I really would like to think it's what we kind of touched on, is me being more vulnerable, me accepting, because I think that so many people have so much to offer.
Right.
And I've always been one to just kind of put my nose here and just grind, and honestly just be selfish in a sense, like really hone in on but with having children and my wife, it's opened up so much, as far as realizing there's just it's a big world out there, man. There's so many people that have so much to say and do that, and that you can help each other. It's not just a one way.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit on something, and I want to keep talking because a lot of times we think about athletes just being big and strong and how they can change a culture by those major attributes being, freaking natures, or being able to dunk, or being able to run a 4-1 or whatever. But you said something that you believe that you're transforming the game by being vulnerable. And I think that's a message for humanity or for the world in general. If we learn to be more vulnerable with each other, with our families, even with ourselves, and giving ourselves a pass every now and then. And, I had these struggles and being in touch with them, man. I did not expect this interview to go this way, but I'm so glad, so glad that it did. It is a privilege, brother, to meet you. When I'm down in Daytona, I go often. I'm from Daytona, so I'm in Miami now. So that's kind of weird how our paths.
You took my house. I took yours.
Hey, that's right. So definitely, when I'm in town, I'll definitely stop by, man, and want to shake your hand in person. So if you can give me one emphatic, now I'm doing this to everybody. If you can give me one emphatic, transform the game, that will end our podcast for this evening.
Transform the game.
My man. Appreciate you, Coach.
All right, take care, man.
All right, bro.
Look, that's a wrap. Do me a favor, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, Transform the Game. See you next week.